This week, the Supreme Court dealt a devastating blow to the LGBTQ community. In a unanimous decision, the court ruled in favor of a Philadelphia Catholic social services group that refused to allow same-sex couples to foster children. It was a narrow ruling, but still a disappointing step back for equality. And given the nation's high court is now the most conservative it's been in 70 years, is the future of gay rights in jeopardy? Here to talk about the state of the LGBTQ movement, Sasha Eisenberg, author of the brand new book, The Engagement, America's Quarter-Century Struggle Over Same-Sex Marriage, and Alfonso David, president of the Human Rights Campaign. Thank you both for coming to the Sunday show. Sasha, let me start with you. You're the one with the brand new book. But talk about the premise of your book and how conservative opposition to same-sex marriage actually kind of helped same-sex marriage.
Yeah, Jonathan, in the early 1990s, there was no corner of the gay rights movement that made winning marriage equality a priority. There was barely a politician in the United States who'd been asked his or her opinion on it. There wasn't a gay rights group that had endorsed it. And what happened is that there's a court case in Hawaii that inadvertently leads to a favorable ruling from the Hawaii Supreme Court in 1993. And opponents of gay rights mobilized to stop gays and lesbians from marrying. And within a few years, that has sort of broken down all of the internal divides within the movement, divides over ideology, divides around gender, divides around strategy and tactics. And all of a sudden, you see that the gay rights movement becomes united behind something that had never been one of its priorities before.
And I mean, your book is big. It's several hundred pages long. Was there anything in the reporting that actually, in your reporting, that surprised you that you didn't already know about the movement and particularly the push for marriage equality?
Yeah, I mean, the accidental origins of this grows out of a really, frankly, petty and parochial fight over control of a pride planning committee, which in Honolulu, Hawaii. I mean, anybody that's been on any sort of event planning committee will recognize some of the sort of small-scale pettiness of this, but it spirals out of control, and a local activist ends up launching a PR stunt in December 1990, basically to force the hand of the local ACLU because he thinks they haven't taken seriously his desire to win marriage rights. And that leads to a lawsuit in Hawaii, and some really crazy things happen in the Hawaii Supreme Court. And I just think that when we get to 2015, obviously, and we see the result of all this with the Obergefell decision, and we assume because it ends in justice that this all had to be inevitable. And what's pretty clear from my reporting into the origins of it is that no part of this conflict over marriage was inevitable.
And so, Alfonso, as the president of the Human Rights Campaign, the largest LGBTQ rights organization in the country, your job, one of many of your jobs, is to ensure that legislation and other things that would be helpful to the community get over the finish line, whether it's in towns, states, or federally. And you know where I'm going. The Equality Act. Where is it? And why is it important that the Senate actually vote on it and get it passed into the president's desk?
Well, thank you, Jonathan, and Sasha. Thank you for writing this book, because I think this book highlights that the conservative opposition to LGBTQ rights will fail. It's failed before and it'll fail again. Jonathan, to your question, more than 70% of voters support equality. 1 in 6 youth and young adults identify as LGBTQ. We need the Equality Act because LGBTQ people face discrimination every day. 2/3 of LGBTQ people report experiencing some type of discrimination. So if we live in a democracy, we should make sure that democracy works for all of us. Unfortunately, we're seeing an avalanche of opposition from conservatives that has serious and real collateral consequences for LGBTQ people and their families. More than 250 bills have been introduced in state legislatures around the country. 24 have been signed, forcing families to leave their homes. This is real for LGBTQ people. We need the Equality Act. Where it is, it's in the Senate. We are engaging with senators on both sides of the aisle to advance this bill. And our biggest obstacle is stigma and misinformation, and that is what we're addressing.
So, Alfonso, I don't have time to play the actual clip from Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer, but back on May 28th, he said, I may also ask the Senate to consider gun legislation and LGBTQ equality legislation in the June work period. Have you heard anything from the Majority Leader about the Equality Act getting a vote?
We have engaged with the Majority Leader's office and himself to make sure that we are able to identify all of the votes we need to pass the bill. We want to make sure this bill becomes law. We don't want to engage in an academic exercise. And so we're engaging with the Majority Leader's office to make sure the Equality Act can actually pass. And we're utilizing a variety of strategies to advance the bill forward.
So that sounds like you don't have a date for when
No, we do not.
Okay.
No, and I think, Jonathan, for us, the key is passing the bill, not necessarily identifying a date. And we still have work to do to make sure that the bill can get through the Senate.
So, Sasha, in your book, to close out this interview, you write, this is element 2, there was, Gorsuch wrote, room under the Civil Rights Act for employers to argue that the new rules conflicted with their religious beliefs. Gorsuch expressed sympathy for their concerns and all, but instructed them to prepare lawsuits that would invite the court to rule on, quote, how these doctrines protecting religious liberty interact with the newly expanded civil rights protections. With that invitation, the Supreme Court seemed to close the book on one era of gay rights jurisprudence and open the next. When I saw this excerpt, Sasha, I immediately thought of the Philadelphia case, the Catholic Services case, in the, well, less than a minute we have left. What is, do you believe, that new era of gay rights jurisprudence?
Unlike with Roe v. Wade, where those who lost set out on what has now been a sort of 50-year quest to undermine the core holding of the decision, I don't see anybody on the right that thinks that the Supreme Court is going to overturn Obergefell. What we are seeing is an effort to define what private entities, individuals, bakeries, social service agencies can do to shelter themselves from a decision that they feel goes contrary to their religious teachings.
All right. With that, we're going to have to leave it there. Sasha Eisenberg and Alfonso David, thank you very much.